We continue with our open world completion series, footage submitted by TechZoon. I've just got back from having a lovely lunch. I ate pizza, which I haven't had for a long time, and now I seriously regret it, but hey. There's a lot to talk about for this map. It's going to be an especially fun one for me, particularly with considering Guild Wars 1 locations that return here, and just obscure trivia about the lore, I suppose. So starting out here on the Metrica exit, Brisban is a map that serves as the early mid-game map for both Asura and Sylvari at once. All the other races get a dedicated map for themselves, such as Kessex for the humans, or Diessa Plateau for the chart, and so on. But the Sylvari and Asura have to share. I don't know whether the devs did that primarily motivated by the desire to, you know, condense things together and get the game out because they didn't have time to make more maps, or whether they just did it because, frankly, the lore had dictated these two races were very close to one another and there just wasn't too much space. I mean, where would they put the other map? So Brisban tends to be what it is. I can imagine a world in which to the left of Metrica had been the mid-game Asura map, and above Caledon and to the left slightly, Brisban would have been dedicated just to the Sylvari. I think that could have worked, but it also would have led to an odd thing where Asura were moving away from Lion's Arch, like, to quite a substantive degree. How do you then make it feel really natural for them to get all the way over to Gendaran Fields? Most of the other maps at least get you a little bit closer there, maybe with the Char as an exception. So yeah, I'm not sure what their primary motivation was. Another weird thought is, if you watch my Caledon Forest episode, we talked a lot about the Tengu there and initial plans in the game for the Tengu to have been a playable race. Imagine they were as well. Then you're kind of squeezing a Tengu map in somewhere. And they're basically bordering on Kessex, so maybe Kessex would have been a twin human Tengu map. It's a weird thought, isn't it? Anyway, so we're near a body of water right now. Very easy heart here, just spam activate on things. You can actually do something quite interesting with the colours of the Hylic and change their colours. I think it's at this heart. But mostly going out to that cave at the back is the easier way of dealing with things. Now, as far as Guild Wars 1 is concerned, this body of water here that runs through this map in this little area and ends up going south down into Metrica Province, that, and it's even referenced a bit in one of the storylines. They talk about where a mysterious Sylvari called Malik came from, and the idea might have been it had something to do with this river, potentially. That's actually the River Ullen, which was a significant river in Guild Wars 1 too. In Guild Wars 1, you spend a bit of time in the Maguma jungle and then revisit Kryta, and you kind of sneak back into Kryta through this river. It's the River Ullen. It's the same place here in this game. In fact, let me pull a map up as we move into the bottom left corner now. You'll see that's quite cool because not much of this map is actually overlapping with the Guild Wars 1 stuff. It's because in Guild Wars 1, there was like a cutscene that took you along the River Ullen, and you never really got to explore here. Of really important note, you'll see there's Fort Koga there, which is where we're actually traveling in-game. Fort Koga was a PvP map from Guild Wars 1. PvP maps are a weird one because when the game originally came out, we're talking way back in 05, 06 right now, early 06. These PvP maps were places you would travel around the world to explore to, and you could only participate in combat there for a certain time until you out-leveled them. Then later, they all kind of got rolled into the Battle Isles. So, in truth, when most people think of the Fort Koga PvP map, they think of it being accessed from a remote island chain way to the south. But it does have a proper lore location designation, and it's here. And I was very surprised in Guild Wars 2 when they actually recreated it. You can actually, as you see here, travel to Fort Koga, and you can see it being directly referenced. What's especially cool is the hero challenge there features a ghost running in big long circles. One of the big problems with Guild Wars 1 PvP, the deathmatch PvP, was the idea of people running trolley builds filled with evasion or block techniques and movement, and instead of fighting, they would just run in these big circles for as long as possible to get everyone else to rage quit or be bored. And they were called runners. They were really annoying, and it was kind of a little bit like how in Guild Wars 2, you know how if you're in a dungeon, you've got 5 team members, 4 of them are defeated, and the last guy is in down state. But he's desperate to like try and self-revive. There's no way he'll be able to solo the boss at this point, but he keeps trying to self-revive, and it's annoying everyone. That's kind of like what runners were in PvP for Guild Wars 1. There was no way this last guy would win. It's team deathmatch. He's the last guy. He's 1v4, but he keeps running around for no reason. Really annoying. And so here in Brisban Wildlands, when you get to go to Fort Koga, which as far as I remember is the only Guild Wars 1 PvP arena that is properly like re-implemented in the sequel. When you get to go there, it's a ghost that's just running in circles trying to escape from you. It's a runner, so there's a nice little thing I think goes over a lot of people's heads. Moving off here, we're at this heart. Again, not really explorable in Guild Wars 1, but it's one of my favourite ones as far as the asura are concerned. A little bit of the asura flavour in this next map, with some really clever stuff to do with these panels on the wall where you are asked to do maths. Which whenever I come here, I'm reminded just how much my cognitive mathematic capabilities have slipped over the years. I look back at being at school and being so good with mental arithmetic and stuff and how it's all gone. It's such a sad thing now because it's like, man, I spent all those years and did all that testing and spent all that time getting good at something that really is just not of any impact in my life at all. It feels like wasted time in a way. But yeah, crystal samples have the following sides and identify, you know, what the next in the sequence is or whatever. They were really clever. I really feel like with these ones, particularly through dialogue a lot of the time, you can feel that the devs put a lot of effort into some hearts, and this one is certainly up there for me. If you're good at maths, it's even the fastest way of doing it, which is the perfect balance to me. There's also the opportunity to fight stuff. There's an Asura gate, go into Mysterious Place, and Elder Dragon minions coming out of it, which is all very fun, and it looks very pretty in that room. But as far as actual completionist stuff is concerned, not too necessary. The central areas of Brisban Wildlands have always been a weird one to me. There's a really fun roller beetle race now that if you're looking to get all the roller beetle rewards, you actually end up spending a lot of time on this map. So I feel quite connected to it for that reason because you can kind of race through some of these areas. But as far as any other content, I don't really remember any particular personal story being fun around here or too many events. This event's just kind of a generic Kill Inquest one. Maybe there was a thing in the Legendary Collection to come here, but this lab and all the kind of surrounding areas feels a bit barren to me. Maybe that's okay, because the whole idea of this map is, you know, it's a wildland. If you guys haven't been doing so, if you look, every one of these videos I make, in the description, I have a little bit of lore information. Now, this already appeared in my main Let's Play, so I'm not trying to focus on it too much as these videos go along. I've already delivered the information to you. But for those who didn't see it, there are very well hidden in the UI in-game. For a long time, you could only get it through data mining. Actual lore descriptions that sum up what an area is in brief. And so I've pulled all of those, and they should be in the descriptions of each of these videos from the wiki, so you guys can get a bit of a sense. And yeah, this is a bit of a Badlands, and it's meant to be a little bit empty and a little bit deserty, I guess. This was kind of funny, actually. As far as the launch game was concerned, this was one of the closest to kind of a deserty feeling map we had. I know that seems very strange, but until Season 2 came out and we started getting places like Drytop and the Silver Wastes, and then obviously areas of Heart of Thorns and Path of Fire in particular ended up giving us a lot of that stuff. This was one of the early ones. Another early one, actually, was the Edge of the Mists, come to think of it. So, moving along, we are now actually coming back into Guild Wars 1 territory a little bit. We're kind of in the mission area of Aurora Glade, which is dealing with access to a special hidden city, basically, of refuge out in the Maguma jungle called the Henge of Den Ravi. And the Henge of Den Ravi, in particular, is going to be at the bottom left of Brisbane, which we'll be exploring later. But it's a weird one because it is recreated in Guild Wars 2. But because the story in Guild Wars 1 kind of suggests that if you control the Henge, no one will be able to find you there. That's why the Shining Blade used it to hide from the White Mantle. Unless you're betrayed, no one will ever be able to find you in the Henge properly. So it's always been a weird one on this map here for this game, because when we explore down there, I always have that question in my mind. Are we seeing the real Henge, or are we seeing, like, not the Henge? Is the Henge hidden from us and we can't properly access because we don't know the natures of the jungle or whatever? To this day, I still love the idea of a patch coming out that reveals that to be the truth, and then we can, you know, actually travel inside. There's that whole thing where Guild Wars 1 areas are way bigger than Guild Wars 2 areas, and that's true here as well. The Henge of Den Ravi in Guild Wars 1 is like a full town. It's a big city that you can wander around in with loads of services, had its own PvP map, again, for what it's worth, lots of stuff going on. And then in, oh wait, was Fort Koga? I think Fort Koga was the Henge of Den Ravi one, actually, adjoining to it. But it was a big area, and in Guild Wars 2, we're just going to find it looks like a little bit of a swamp and not much else. So on our left here is a point of interest. We're going to probably climb up to it, maybe go into a cave in a moment. This is near the center of the map, which has a big mountain. So the mountain actually has a name in lore. That description I talked about names it Mount Gnashington, which you'll find in the description of this video, which is weird information. Why is it called Mount Gnashington? I don't really know. Makes me think of Nashblade to a certain extent. But the game barely ever like touches or justifies why it's called Mount Gnashington. There is skritt that live in the middle of it, but there is one NPC in the whole game here in Brisban Wildlands. It's a Silvari you can speak to, who does say Mount Gnashington in game. So it is correct. It's just, I don't know why the devs felt they needed to name the mountain, or you know, what's going on there. I do remember that this mountain was mentioned quite early before the game came out. We were getting lore articles about the various races that inhabited Tyria of 250 years in the future. And so the skritt were being introduced. They didn't exist in the first game, but they were kind of being paired as this part of Asura prehistory from under the ground, and we got all this cool information about how they got smarter together. And so, yeah, with the initial skritt information, they did talk about a giant skritt city, and it turned out to be here in Brisban Wildlands. I do remember their initial description of it all sounded a lot more fun than what we got in the game in the end. I mean, there are a lot of events in this map that close off various gates, and, you know, the king will only have favor with you if you've helped him in a lot of ways. But because there's no, like, real rewards, and because it's maybe, like, a third of the way there to being really satisfying, well fleshed out content. And because it's only a third of the way there, you don't kind of get the full thing. Here you can see we're actually struggling a little bit. Quite nice. This event's not one that I remember being too tricky, but I think the turrets are the big problem. And there might even be a lot of retaliation around as well. As a mesmer, we do lots of little packets. Maybe the retaliation kind of hurts, and we're obviously a little bit squishy. Very comfortable area that's quite condensed. You get a point of interest here. You get a heart. There's this event that can actually spawn a lot of extra creatures, and I believe a boss will spawn here too. And there's personal story in this little lab. Actually, quite significant personal story as well. If you play the personal story here, you can interact with Kudu, who is, to tell you the truth, quite a big character for the core game, but only Asura really get his full story, which I've always sort of regretted. Kudu was actually referenced in some of the more recent patches, well, semi-recent patches now too, so it's nice to see he's not forgotten, as he was so big a part of the game. Anyway, I guess opting to break these power generators and stuff is better than actually going for the completion of the whole event. Maybe hit some of these receivers. You can kind of see the format here. Run around, press F, kill things, break ambient objects. Which, I want to clarify, I mentioned a few videos ago, is not the same to me as like truly destructible terrain. You know, breaking walls and bridges and windows and stuff. It's not quite the same. Oh, so there is an icon on the minimap right now for a glob of ecto. So one of the later updates added ecto gambling. And while most people do it from the more convenient location of Lion's Arch, the devs did think that it would be fitting to have it here as well inside this city. So that's nice, and you can do it here. I've always thought this is kind of weird because what it means is Silvari and Asura characters that are new to the game will be introduced to the concept of ecto gambling like right around now, quite early, while all the other races won't, and they have to go to a more obscure place in the already cluttered Lion's Arch before they actually kind of find out about it. I think I remember a story when ecto gambling was added at one point, they moved the vendor for it in Lion's Arch right next to the trading post, and apparently that had a huge impact on the amount of ecto gambling that was happening in the game, and it had a huge impact on the economy. So much so that they actually reverted the change. I never actually got to experience that in game, but I've heard that a few times. This is crazy. So, you know, just coming across the vendor definitely does have an impact. And I wonder whether that means that, you know, players of these races are slightly more inclined to care about it or money or something over a long enough period of time. And, you know, I do think in terms of the game's pacing, these maps, the ones immediately following the starter map, are very special in that you've just about got familiar with the game's fundamentals and are probably getting thirsty for new stuff and new systems and new things to think about, and anything could still be important to you at this time. So I think that this is probably a really important time for learning and telegraphing to players what the game is. By the time you get through Gendaran, the third map, and then beyond, you're probably starting to get into a routine and you feel like you've got a good sense of the game. But right about here, I think people are still thirsty and in that learning mode. So stuff you introduce to people around here is really important. And, well, there's ecto gambling on this map. So, wow, that destroy did a lot of damage to us here. We are with the Skritt King in the center of the city. Skritsburg is open, as it usually is. This is, again, is a cool meta, but not quite there. Usually it's open whenever I arrive, or maybe one of the doorways is closed. You see that on the minimap there are these like little white cogs that represent mechanics. That's where the doors are. But I feel like nothing's ever really telegraphed that well here on this map, and that the way that all the events relate could be done a bit better. It's just a little bit confusing and tricky to navigate this area. I'll also say it feels a bit open. I wish it was a bit more cluttered, but I guess there's frame rate considerations to be had. Location of actually several personal story quests, including a very cool one with a mirror here. This room I always thought was really rather beautiful, but not much reason to climb down. There's a diving goggles. So, yeah, we won't be showing that in these videos, but as you do map completion, there are some achievements that almost function as additional, like, objectives for you to go for. Like, you could almost think of this map as, yes, it has X hearts, Y point of interest, Z vistas, and so on. But it also has, like, these other things, like the Koga Mariner journals that you can find hidden around the whole world. They're almost like a little map completion thing if you're going for the achievements too. There's, of course, the diving goggles as well. So there is actually a pair in this room that I think if you're not careful with, you'll end up hitting really shallow water. I've always liked the idea of... You know how with achievements you can hit the eyeball and it will toggle it onto the top right instead of your dailies so you can track its progress? I always like the idea of what if that eyeball mechanic actually just expanded the map completion objectives box. When you open the world map and you look on the top left, you know, you get, it says hearts, X out of X, blah, blah, blah. It'd be kind of cool if, like, you could toggle certain achievements like diving goggles to be there and then they would actually appear. You could mouse over and it would highlight where it is on the map at the same time. There's a lot of, like, really quite robust UI and stuff that the devs could have been using. And they don't. They went with a different system in the end. The eyeball and it shows on the top right. And then you have to click the box and say, show me, and it slowly, manually scrolls you over there like a scout and whatnot. So, another hero challenge. I don't really remember this one being too tricky, but again, it is skritt, big damage. I think if there's sometimes when this part of the city is closed, there's tons of destroyers around. I think if there's destroyers here, you run past them all because you're in a rush and you don't kill them, they can aggro on you as you're doing that hero challenge, and it can be more tricky. Obviously, it depends what class you're on as well, how viable some of these things are. We're obviously doing this on a Mesmer. One of the other great ones would be Thief. Because in situations like that hero challenge, you can actually just use Infiltrator's Arrow to teleport straight up. On a Mesmer, we're a little bit more limited with how regularly we can blink. But as a Thief, the world is kind of your oyster. And you know what we're doing with our portals quite often? You know, we portal, go somewhere, come back. Well, Shadow Step allows you to do that. And a lot more on, you know, less prohibitive cooldown and all that kind of stuff. So I'm actually really impressed by the footage right now, because I always end up getting lost and moving around in this mountain, Mount Gnashington, for a long time. I end up, like, going in and then leaving and then coming in through another one of the entrances, or I try to, but the entrance is too high. It's only meant to be an exit. So doing it with no mounts, you know, no Springer to just give you these quick shortcuts, I think is really nice. There's, in particular, if you're just using the minimap to navigate all the time, there's a moment in this part of map completion where you look like you're really close to a hero challenge or something, but there's this obnoxiously huge wall of scrap right in front of you, and to get around it takes ages. And it looks like we've managed to quite handily avoid that. Even despite these efficiencies here, this is actually a really long clear. I mean, it's a very short clear, but in context of the full series, this one took actually longer than Lornar's Pass. Believe it or not, and that might be in part that Lornar's Pass was done super efficiently. We'll get to that video later. But yeah, this one actually took longer. This one took nearly a full hour to beat, and Lornar's was less so. Lornar's, to me, in both games, is like the ultimate big map. I know I shouldn't think that way anymore, because obviously the Path of Fire maps came out, and they're huge. But Lornar still holds that special place to me. Maybe that's a sign that I'm slipping, getting out of touch. Need to update my information more regularly. Not just know it, but actually like absorb it and make it natural. Anyway, so yeah, just a little bit more killing of things for the skritt here. A weird thing that a lot of people don't know about, if you really go for all the achievements in the game, there was a Black Lion update many years ago that gave you, I think it was in association with Christmas, that was when the devs were very first playing with the idea of Black Lion selling you experiences, not just skins. So one of the main criticisms with the game for a long time was the Black Lion store just gives you skins, there's nothing to play, there's nothing really to do with it, and it doesn't feel fun. We want to be able to buy experiences. And they prototyped this thing where you would buy an item and then you could like clean it up and find another item. You're basically trying to build the ultimate shiny as like a Christmas present or something. God, my information on this is so hazy now. But it actually involves Skritsburg here and a really weird like minor quest where you present this item to the Skritt King and so on. And so it is content that's here that very few people will do. I only did super recently. I did maybe sometime last year where I was really going super heavy on those achievements last year. And it's kind of gone in one ear out the other, but I do know for a fact that there's that extra little thing here now, which is nice. So just one more heart to do now. I guess we've done like a bit of a 50-50 thing on a lot of them. In some cases, that is the right way to go. You know, if you're trying to get progress mostly by killing stuff, you could clear the whole room out, wander off, do other stuff, and then when you return, all the stuff's back, you know? So you're getting value out of that time in which things are trying to respawn, instead of just standing there and wondering what the hell else there is to do. Here, this is pretty nice, swinging in the grubs. The use of focus, by the way, in this map comp is pretty good. Being able to ball things up so that then our Greatsword 4 actually hits them, or our Blurred Frenzy hits them, or our Focus 5 hits them. I usually wouldn't have thought of that. I'd probably be running Sword Offhand or something, but this is probably a bit better for getting those fast kills and completing a lot of hearts in really, really rapid succession. So leaving the mountain now, heading out to the more easterly reaches of the map. I would say that they do come across a little bit with Guild Wars 1, a map called the Twin Serpent Lakes, which was a super minor area in the first game, part of Kryta, but in very distant Kryta, as far as the original game's geography was concerned, with very limited quests or reason to go to. It was actually in that map that a side quest revealed the true line of kings for Kryta, and you could first find the character Queen Salma, who, you know, is a very big part of the lore, and ancestor Jenna is her descendant. But back at the launch in Guild Wars 1, she was just almost like this generic NPC. It was almost like a generic thing that they expanded on with the War and Kryta and stuff. But the Twin Serpent Lakes is a map that I was really, really liked, just because it was so quiet and lonely feeling and out of the way and had a cool name. And yeah, that more kind of overlaps with the corner of this map, plus the corner of Caledon, plus the corner of Kessex, but somewhere in this vague area. As for the meantime, we are dealing with the Nightmare Court. Because, again, it's not all Asura, so we've seen mostly Asura stuff so far. We didn't really get to enjoy some of the labs. Like, one of those labs, they're basically developing nukes and stuff. It's really, really cool. But it's also Sylvari, so the Nightmare Court do appear. This heart is really no different to the hearts where you're clearing out their bases in the Caledon Forest. And, yeah, I think that telegraphs to a lot of people the kind of experience they're in for. But I suppose there's some slightly different stuff. Burning the brambles feels a little bit different. They're fun to fight too. I like the Nightmare Courtiers just because of their whip abilities. I've always loved the idea of the whip being a proper item, a proper weapon in Guild Wars. But it's not. So you get some enemies use a whip, and it's kind of a very special, weird animation you don't find much elsewhere. The closest thing to a whip you get is Elementalists using dagger in air attunement. Get like a lightning whip. But it's not much more than that. So yeah, Watchful Source, brilliant area, loads of dialogue, tons of people to talk to, lots to stand around and wait for ambient dialogue to trigger for you. We just need the waypoint. This is also where you'd start if you came from Caledon. Grabbing this vista from this angle. I usually go from higher up for that vista. I don't think I ever really get it that way. I think I come from the cliff up here and jump through the tree, which now that I'm looking at it, it makes a lot less sense. This is an interesting Nightmare Court event as well. It's got this cool idea of this tree that they're trying to corrupt. And obviously the idea of having a corrupt tree and all the stuff with Malik and stuff. That they're all big stories with the Sylvari, particularly in this area of the world as well. I guess we'll just be dealing with termites. I don't like this thing with the termites here, because in a later map, you're asked to deal with termites. But where you're dealing with termites there, I believe it's in Sparkfly. It's a much more convoluted process that's fun, but it like involves using turrets and stuff and smoking them out. And yet on this map, you're just allowed to press F and get them. I don't mind the devs reusing concepts, but I would rather that it's sort of consistent, you know. I'd like to see a termite mound and know, oh, there's a process here that will be true for all the termite mounds. But instead, you know, sometimes I guess these are weaker termites with a weaker mound or something. I don't know. Maybe we'll revisit this topic when we get back to Sparkfly later. But yeah, so we get this tree. It's a shame that we won't really be talking to the characters here. Can kind of see an oak heart spirit there. We skipped over an area of the map earlier where there's a really fun event where one of the druids of the Maguma jungle, one of the oak hearts, spirit is disconnected from its body. And so you can find on the map a stone oak heart with no, you know, flowers or life to it anywhere. But once you finish the dynamic event and escort this thing over, it blooms up and flowers appear and all these plants, and it's very, very beautiful. I like that event a lot because, again, I think dynamic events are best when they affect the world for having happened. So, and that means in more ways than just, oh, this enemy owns this territory now, or, oh, this waypoint has been contested, which is what they tend to end up going with a lot. But when areas actually look and feel different, that's my favorite. I really enjoy that. I wonder whether the devs had an idea for doing that a lot with the brand too, because one of the first maps they ever made with the brand, Blaze Ridge, has all this dialogue and all this information written in it about these pylons that they're using to get rid of the brand storm temporarily or to temper it. And I wonder whether maybe they had been thinking of doing dynamic events where the storm goes away for a second. We see in more recent content that they do that in spades, and it's always very, very enjoyable. To the top right corner of the map now. Not quite in any Guild Wars 1 locations. This is, however, the entrance to Gendaran. This place is really special. Not Gendaran, sorry, Kessex Hill. This place is really special to me in a weird way, because this is where I gave up on my first ever character. So I made a Mesmer. I leveled and map completed Queensdale and all of Kessex. And it took me about 3 days, 3 real world days to do that, to get that far. And I was around level 30. Maybe I was a little bit earlier. But I unlocked the skill portal right here, where we're killing stuff and trying to deal with things. And there we are using it. Because I've been really excited about the prospect of playing with portal. It was such a unique and fun thing. And it felt really fiddly. And the more I thought about it, I just wasn't enjoying playing Mesmer. Everything felt fiddly. And none of it felt as fun as the Elementalist that I had played so much of pre-release. And hell, most of the characters that I'd played through the betas. So I gave it up right here. This is basically where I logged out, where we're looking at right now. And I never came back onto the Mesmer for ages. I became an Ellie main at that point. I built an Asura. So the Asura would end up in this region of the world quite quickly too, just coming from a totally different angle. And well, the rest was history. I can't remember when I eventually did level the Mesmer up to 80. I think it might have only been motivated by doing dungeon runs. I used to duo Ara and sell Ara runs. We used to do path 1, 2, and 4. We never did the one of the paths you had to invite someone else in to get past Shoggoth, the Tara Elemental. We never did that one. We used to run all the other ones, and Mesmer was particularly good at that time for a lot of that stuff, skipping people through with portals and whatnot. Anyway, this area had a pretty cool update in later years. Anyone new to the game and is running through all the living world, you'll find that they actually add a hidden mini dungeon, a full-fledged instance to do with the White Mantle story right here in the Shining Blade. Really nice. I love to see that the devs did that. And we come to something super special in a moment. Against this north wall, we will find a bunch of bandits that are building away at a broken down bridge. And right against this north wall, there seems to be a portal that takes you to another map. So let's talk about this. In Guild Wars 1, you can go north up there. In fact, it was a pretty well-trafficked, visited place. One of the missions that you beat in Kryta teleports you into the Maguma jungle at an outpost called the Druids Overlook. And, well, that's pretty much kind of just north of us here. There's the Druids Overlook, and then there's this big explorable called the Sagelands. It's, you know, a deserty region of the world with these big crevices that when you walk into were super overgrown, lovely jungles with magical waters. Basically, north of this wall is a lot what the Heart of Thorns Guild Wars 2 expansion feels like, but it was in Guild Wars 1. And there were multiple quests that you could do there. There were broken down statues of the gods at the outpost, or at least one of them. It was a really fun place. And for people who are really completionists, they could travel through the Sagelands back east and find another whole map called the Majesty's Rest, where there was an old, like, broken down tomb with these dragons on it. There was a place called the Mausoleum that you could visit during only one of the festival events, and then finally you would get back into Crater. So basically, yeah, there's a lot of content up there. None of it is available in Guild Wars 2. Even with the mini dungeon I was just talking about that they added, none of it's up there. But there is a hint that maybe one day we will be able to go up there because of this broken bridge and a suggestion of a portal. If you use a mount to jump over the broken bridge, or before mounts got added, if you just, you know, did some cheaty game-breaking stuff and you climbed over there, you can walk against the portal, it just won't teleport you. So at some point, ArenaNet had a plan for there to be a map there. Here's what's interesting. Through data mining, we know what most of the maps they ever wanted to make were going to be. We know that they were going to have a map, for example, around Claw Island and in that central area of Crichton near Lion's Arch. We know that they were going to have the Lake Doric map. We know these things and we can even explore them. There has never been, in any data mining possible by the community or any comments from the devs, a map that actually existed north of here. So when that bridge was built, it seems the devs did it purely as a tease. Not only that, but that's not the only time they did it. At the same time in Brisban Wildlands, in the bottom left is a fort. And behind the fort was another hint at a portal. Now that one has since become a thing. That one takes us into the expansion areas now. It takes us through the Silver Waste and then finally Heart of Thorns. So back in, what was it, 2015, 2016, the fort did get paid off and expanded on. But even now here in 2020, we can't go north. And they've revealed that the next expansion is going to be the End of Dragons set in Cantha. So even there, it doesn't seem like it's going to be a thing. So I really like this bandit bridge in Brisban Wildlands. It's become such a long-term thing now. I feel like the game will lose something the day that finally we can travel over there. You know, it almost feels like it's special for having been such a long tease, and maybe they shouldn't mess with it. I don't know. On the other hand, I do want to see those places be explored. I guess time will tell. It's also a weird one because this region of the world is really very tied to human Crichton stuff and, you know, the first expansion Heart of Thorns stuff. What possible justification would we have for going up there now? Really? I mean, there's not much except the whole hidden story of the other Silvari tree and Malik. So maybe we'll go to Cantha, we'll get some kind of associated story between the Wardens and the Silvari. The whole idea of Malik and the other tree will become a thing, and we'll finally go north at that point. Maybe that's when we go to the Sage Lands. That's where my money is at the moment, but you never can quite tell. So another cool thing that we saw a second ago, by the way, was a little graveyard. That graveyard has a really cool hint about a character that went missing. I used to do a series on the channel called Guild Wars Mysteries, Guild Wars 2 Mysteries, which I never formally decided to end. It's just we kind of ran out of really good big mysteries. The game started looking at them and delivering answers to them, and many of the new mysteries just kind of feel like general story speculation to me now, so it's not appropriate for the same format. So while I would still happily make any more Guild Wars 2 Mysteries, there's no big topics that I haven't covered already, except maybe the origin of a couple of races. So what I was thinking of doing for a long time is Guild Wars 2 mini mysteries, where I find just small little fun things about the world that we don't have answers to, and we just do brief productions on them. That graveyard would be the focus of one of those videos. It has a grave that talks about an asura that went missing, and the question is, where did they go, or what happened? And that's pretty much it, really. But reading the graves is always a fun thing, no matter where you are in the game. Obviously, in a lot of the human areas, the graveyards are very good. But there's good graveyards out in the Norn areas, all over the place. So here we're pretty much under the bridge, by the way. I know I spent so long talking about it, but I can't really trust that it's a part of map completion, so we may not see it directly. But the bridge is sort of just behind us now. And yeah, they would have been working away. This is a nice heart. In as much as we actually get to infiltrate again. It's a bit like that Silvari heart we saw before, where we infiltrate the Nightmare Court. A little bit more involved now, though. There is no mechanic where you can lose heart progress, but there are many different things you can do to sabotage these guys. Now, when I usually come and do this heart, I opt for the combat. I basically spam, I think it's skill 2? I think the icon for skill 2 looks like backstab here. I think it's skill 2, and in that way you can very quickly kill anyone that you duel with. You can be barbaric basically every time. But I suppose maybe poisoning their supplies or destroying their their wares and stuff is just as good. I like the kind of moral take that they have on this heart as well, in that with most of the bandit forts and stuff in the game, you just kill them. You just go out and slaughter them all. But on this one, you actually get to go in amongst them and convince them that, you know, maybe life isn't better for them here. Maybe they were wrong with how they felt about the current political situation in Kryta. Maybe they should go home. And you can actually convince them to do that, and that's what gives you credit. And doing it in kind of a pacifist way is nice. In fact, that looks like the way that we've done this here. Pure pacifism. Oh, almost. Looks like we're going to get 1 kill. So, yeah, the idea of doing open world as a pacifist is totally possible, by the way. That is one challenge I've never done, and I'm kind of interested in, or have been kind of interested in. The idea is you can never kill anyone. I know some people have engaged with it, and you've got to see how far you can get. The way you do most is through resurrection. So there are some hearts where it's like, kill centaurs, assist the seraph. That's it. It's like, well, what do? You can't do anything because you can't kill any centaurs. But maybe you can lure seraph over to them to resurrect them, and then that therefore gives you progress. It's an interesting side of the game. I'm always looking for new ways to enjoy the game and, you know, expand my understanding of what the game is and how different it feels as an RPG under different rule sets. So that's a fun one, I think, but it's also a very, very long idea. So it's always kind of been slightly on the back burner, slightly on the shelf. Well, here we get a ton of bandits just to kill. Pretty much exactly what I was talking about a second ago. This place I spent a lot of time at. Not only did it eventually become the location of a guild puzzle, my favorite of the guild puzzles. Well, is that true? Yeah, probably. With a really cool maze where you're essentially rats in a maze in a big experiment, as you can see here. And you run right over for this extra waypoint here. But also, all of the ore that's around. If you look in the chasms down there, loads and loads and loads of veins of ore. This was my primary iron mining spot. I'm pretty sure it's iron all around here. Maybe there's a little bit, some of the dueling stuff, a bit of bronze, a bit of silver, maybe. But yeah, this was an excellent location back then. And it kind of fits as well, because it looks like a quarry. You're enjoying it. This fort can occasionally be very dangerous because of the spawning of a very deadly dynamic event with a big dangerous boss. And especially actually on the bottom left, where as we move now towards the fort that I was talking about earlier, which eventually became the entrance to the Silver Waste and so on. There's a really cool dynamic event there that I really recommend you guys try out, where basically it's an emulation of the classic MMO Holy Trinity. So one of the big things that ArenaNet tried to do with this game is to break up the idea that only some classes can heal, and then some classes have to be damage, and some classes have to be tanks, and that has to define the way all combat is. And it was a really noble, cool idea, but I think the studio was always way too wishy-washy and uncertain on how exactly they're going to pull it off. But there had definitely been a lot of talk before the game came out about breaking away from the Trinity, about having a more dynamic Trinity where people emergently swap roles on the fly and all classes are capable of everything, and how does that all work? And so then they introduced this event, which basically is just making fun of the Trinity, which the devs were kind of saying that they wanted to move away from. I personally don't think that they did a very good job at all as far as combat design and endgame design is with answering a lot of those questions, but the event remains fun nonetheless. One of the things that the devs wanted to do, to be very careful about, was not having a taunt mechanic. Guild Wars 1 never had a taunt mechanic either. In a lot of other games, if you add a really prominent taunt mechanic, encounters can become really binary. It's just hold up the debuff or hold up the buff to keep aggro, and then that's it, you know. And they didn't really have too sophisticated combat. Nowadays, there's fixation in the game, and there is proper taunt in the game, and they've really figured out a lot of robust ways to take that forwards. But back in 2012, they hadn't. So taunt didn't exist, just as it didn't exist in Guild Wars 1. It was a more meat shield approach, and the AI was always a little bit unpredictable. But in this event that makes fun of the Holy Trinity, there actually is taunt. There's two versions of taunt in Guild Wars 2, guys. There's the version that you can use on all your skills and stuff now, but there's also a variant of taunt on this event. And I'm not sure it's properly hooked up or done very well, but it is here. And it's on there's 3 bosses you fight at once. One of them's the tanky guy, and he will actually taunt you. That was always a fun bit of trivia. This area itself looks very different from launch now, just because if you glance over at the fort itself, you can find vine tendrils, and you can see that the gates to the fort are open, and there's bodies and stuff everywhere. That was not the case before. When the game originally came out, there were no tendrils, obviously. The fort was intact, and lining all across the roof, the walls here, you see these seraph archers? Instead of them being seraph archers, they were bandits. They were actually champion level 80 bandits. Now, because of the way that level scaling works in the game, we are not level 80 right now. We are scaled down to be appropriate. We're around level 20 at the moment, 23, something like that. So they were just completely impossible to fight, which is kind of a rare thing for Guild Wars 2, honestly, that there's something so dangerous that theoretically could be killed, but you just can't. And they all had bows, so if you got too close, they'd shoot you. And so you couldn't even glimpse that there was a sneaky portal out of the map unless you broke out of the map by climbing on all these cliffs and looked over the wall. And I did a video on that many years ago as well. It actually involved this facility here and getting up on that bridge above us, which always looks so cool. I always like the suggestion that you can travel to a place that's nearby, but you actually can't. So here we get a nice little compound. No heart to do here, but you notice that dynamic event that's finished there. That's a pretty special dynamic event. Back in the day when there was less content and people really wanted to go for all the achievements, one of the hardest achievements in the game was Giant Slayer, because there are barely any giants in Guild Wars 2, and the only ones that existed, by and large, were epic champions that did crazy amounts of damage, massive amounts of CC, and you could only destroy with like a genuine Zerg of players. And there were like 3 to choose from. And the achievement wanted you to kill 1,000. You kill one and you have to like wait for an hour for it to respawn and have a whole Zerg to do combat with it. It's just crazy, just almost impossible to get Giant Slayer. But happily, that event with that golem that you just saw, when that event starts, it spawns a bunch of weak golems. So if you get a Zerg to do this event, giants. So if you got a Zerg to do this event, you could tag like 5 giants at once. With the old server guesting feature, you could then guest to another server, spawn it again, and bring the whole Zerg with you. Then guest to another server, spawn it again, guest to another server, spawn it again, and then restart. And hopefully about that point, it's been like 10 minutes. There was a whole process to cancel the event at the right time so that it would reset quicker. If you actually beat the event, it would have a much longer cooldown. There's a whole technique to it. And I never really, I still do this. Oh, I only just got Giant Slayer this year. I grinded the hell out of it earlier this year. But, right before my account tour this year. But I did participate a little bit in this before I got too bored. This area here is also special. This is also all new. This was introduced right at the start of Season 2. If you've been watching my LP of that, you'll know that now. But what's kind of amazing is, as I've described to you, there were 2 suggestions at exits to the Brisban Wildlands. There was the bridge and the fort, and then ArenaNet added a way out of the Wildlands post-release, but they didn't use the bridge and they didn't use the fort. They added a whole other area, which is down there on the bottom left. The map that takes you to is called Drytop, which was a Guild Wars 1 location. Funnily enough, doesn't actually line up with the real Drytop from the original game. So it's all a bit broken down and shifted on that one. But I've always thought that was really, really funny that ArenaNet had this map as a double candidate for expansion. And they used neither of the candidates. It was later than that they went to do the fort. Fun little twist. So here we are. We are at the Henge of Den Ravi. Pretty nice. It's an area that's quite cool because it's near the Thormanova reactor disaster as well. So if you watch my Metrica Province video, you will have heard me talking about random enemies that have the dissipated, confused buff on them. They're getting teleported in all over the place. And well, that's happening near here too. And there's even some cool little hints about the reactor and fun mysteries in this area of the world. Moving further over, you get to the Priory, the Henge of Den Ravi itself, where the Derman Priory are studying it, as well as the Inquest. And I mean, the game pretty much makes it very clear that we're at the Henge of Den Ravi, and geographically we are. But in terms of how the layout of the area, it's really not the same in any way, and it's not as big. And I don't know, just because of that story in the first game, that if you were in the Henge, you would be hidden from anyone who wanted to come at you. Maybe this is like a fake Henge, guys. Maybe this is like an illusion or something. I know the idea is the Druids are gone, and the Oak Hearts are all frozen here, and we don't really know what more we can do, but it would be a fun story to come back here one day. I think that'd be very cool. Hey, maybe if there was going to be a big Malik Second Pale Tree arc north in the Sagelands, they could also look a little bit at the Henge of Denravi again. Maybe that's where some of those other Sylvari have been hiding. Well, there you go. We're just constructing theories as we go. The hut itself is pretty boring. Pick up these stink horns, activate the control panels. There are some fun events that take place here, but nothing too major. And that's our last hut. That's the last one for this map. We can move over to this little outpost here, which I remember standing around at, waiting for ambient dialogue for hours before giving up recently. And there you have it. That's map completion of Brisban Wildlands. A surprisingly long one and a surprisingly tricky one, but filled with really amazing trivia, interesting things. Hope you guys enjoyed this little casual tour, and I'll be back for the next one next time. Thanks to TechZoom. Take it easy, everyone.